to ask the First Minister when she'll next meet the Auditor-General for Scotland.
First Minister.
I have no current plans, but the Permanent Secretary meets the Auditor-General on a regular basis, and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance last met with the Auditor-General on the 30th of August.
Kezia Dugdale.
This morning, Scotland's rail network was thrown into chaos. A broken-down train disrupted the travel plans for tens of thousands of commuters across the Central Belt. It has been yet another shambolic day, causing misery for passengers. The Transport Minister, Humza Yousaf, who crosses the country in his ministerial car, took to Twitter this morning to admit the ScotRail performance is not good enough. Does the First Minister really understand just how angry Scotland's commuters are today?
First Minister.
Yes, I do. I and indeed Humza Yousaf took part in a conference call with ScotRail earlier this morning. I know they are extremely sorry for the disruption that passengers have experienced this morning, and I share that sentiment. The problem this morning, as Kezia Dugdale has alluded to, was caused by a train breaking down between Waverley and Haymarket Station just at Princes Street Gardens. All the lines into Edinburgh were blocked by the train that had broken down. ScotRail described it to me this morning as probably the worst location in the country for a breakdown like this to happen, because there was no other ways for the trains to get into Waverley Station. The train was removed at around 8:30 this morning. There has been a restricted train service running on many routes since then, while the network returned to normal. I'm advised by ScotRail, was advised by ScotRail just before I came into the chamber that the service is more or less returned to normal right now. It has caused significant disruption. Now, what I would say, and say this seriously, is there are wider performance issues around ScotRail right now. We've discussed them in this chamber before. That's why there is in place an improvement plan that Humza Yousaf is monitoring very closely. But I hope all members would accept that however regrettable it is, and it is deeply regrettable, on occasion trains will break down whatever party is in government. The priority when that happens is to get services back to normal as quickly as possible, and that is what ScotRail has been focused on this morning.
Kezia Dugdale.
Thank you, President Officer. Look, we can accept that today's disruption might be a one-off. But yesterday was considered just a normal day on Scotland's rail network, and you can bet there are wider performance issues, First Minister. Scottish Labour can reveal the performance figure for yesterday was 79%. That means that on a normal day, more than 1 in 5 trains failed to arrive on time. In rural areas, yesterday's performance figure was 60%. That's against a target of 91%. It's not even close, First Minister. Passengers deserve better, and it is this government's responsibility to fix it. When I challenged the First Minister on this 6 weeks ago, she said the government had an improvement plan. Humza Yousaf said he had confidence in that improvement plan. Well, passengers are fast losing confidence in him. How bad does it have to get before the First Minister steps in and sorts out this mess?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, the government does accept our responsibility in this matter, and we are working with ScotRail to make sure that train services are of a standard that the travelling public has a right to expect. And I repeat the apology that ScotRail have expressed for the disruption this morning, which was caused by an extraordinary set of circumstances. In terms of the wider issues, as I have said in this chamber before, the standard that ScotRail is expected to meet is 91% against punctuality standards. That generally at the moment is about 89%, although as Kezia Dugdale has just narrated, there will be variations to that. That is not good enough. That is why the improvement plan is in place. That is why Humza Yousaf continues to work with ScotRail to improve it. Just this week, we heard plans about additional trains coming into services to service, about ScotRail rightly ceasing the practice at peak hour time of missing stops where trains are running late. So these are serious issues issues that affect the travelling public on a daily basis, and we are absolutely determined to make sure that we work with ScotRail to rectify them. On a wider sense, as I again have said in this chamber previously, there are options for the contract to be broken early, and we will keep that option under review. Thanks to pressure of this government, in future we will also have the option of having a public sector organisation bid for the rail franchise, and I think that is a step forward after Labour, for 13 years in government, refusing to give us the power to do that. So these are serious issues. I take my responsibility and the government's responsibility seriously to make sure we get on top of these issues, as I've said we will.
Kezia Dugdale.
We've had an apology from ScotRail, Presiding Officer, but I think commuters would like to hear an apology from the First Minister. And rail passengers don't feel like they've seen any sort of improvement over that 6-week period. Last week, ScotRail cancelled trains because it expected the rails to be slippery due to excessive moisture. Rain in Scotland, Presiding Officer. Who could have predicted that? But for Scotland's rail passengers, this isn't a laughing matter anymore. Overcrowded trains, delayed trains, cancelled trains. That's the SNP's idea of a world-leading deal for passengers. Isn't it clear, more than ever, that Labour's policy for a people's ScotRail, run for passengers, not for profit, is the best solution for Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, people watching this will have heard me say that I am sorry for the disruption that was caused this morning, and also sorry for the disruption that any passenger faces on any day of the week. That's ScotRail's position, and it is also mine. In terms of some of the decisions that Kezia Dugdale alluded to there, ScotRail have a responsibility to ensure the safe running of trains. And it's easy to make jokes about moisture, but they have that responsibility, and it's important that they discharge that responsibility. In terms of the wider issues, I absolutely accept that things are not good enough. That is why the improvement plan is in place, and that is why we will stick with that until things are running to a standard that the public have a right to expect. But on the wider issue of a people's railway, let me point out again that the reason it was not possible for a public sector organisation to bid for the rail franchise when Abellio bid and won that contract was that we didn't have the power to do that. And we had asked the previous Labour government at Westminster to change the law or to give us the power to change the law here, and they refused point blank to do that. Kezia Dugdale can shake her head, but that, I'm afraid, is the reality of the situation. Now we do have that power, we are going to have that power, and we've made clear that by the time this contract comes up for renewal, whether that's on schedule or early, there will be the ability of a public sector organisation to bid for it. That's the progress we've made, progress that was impeded for Labour, by Labour for a long, long time.